one of the things that was brought up is sometimes people will totally make a decision off of F, finances, all right? In some cases, that may outweigh anything else. That's their judgment. But those F's become very important, and understanding somebody's F's become very critical in dealing with them. And I don't know the places everybody is from. Maybe you're from a very small place like me. Maybe you're from a larger place. But every community has people that are difficult to get along with. And some of them are your customers. Some of them are people that you have to deal with in other walks of life. Every place has got one. And in my hometown, it was the diesel mechanic. And the diesel mechanic's name was Gary. Now, Gary's long since retired, so he's not in the community anymore. But Gary was a difficult guy to get along with. And in my hometown, that's where we had to go to take our trucks. And in our farm, we cut corn silage in the summer. Some of you be familiar with corn silage. We have big 10-wheeler trucks that we use to catch the silage, take it to the pit. Well, one of the problems we had is since you're cutting in the middle of August, and sometimes it's hot, it's nasty type of weather, the trucks would overheat. And so we're always having trouble with radiators and with trucks overheating. And so Gary always worked on our trucks, but Gary could be difficult to get along with. And over time, Dad and I kind of laughed about it because Gary in his shop had what we called Gary's rules. And when you went into Gary's shop, he had a little parts counter, and above the counter, he had put up different rules. Now, he didn't call them Gary's rules, but that's what we called them. And every time you went in, it seemed like there was a new piece of paper hanging up there with another rule on it, and you could tell Gary had another run-in with some person in the community. Now, some of his rules made a lot of sense. Like he had one rule that said, "You may not park your vehicle on my lot without permission." That makes sense. He had another one that says, "You may not call me after hours about the status of your vehicle." And you could tell that rule lasted for like all of 24 hours because right next to it was a rule that said, "You may not call my employees at home after hours about the status of your vehicle." He had one that said, "You may not ask me about advice on fixing your vehicle if I'm not fixing your vehicle." He had another one that said, "You may not buy parts at another place for me to put on your vehicle." And these went on and on and on. And so there were all these rules. Well, we laughed about it, but Dad was always good to get along with. Dad, you know, he got to know Gary after a while. He would always try to visit with Gary, find out a little bit about who he was, what he liked, and so forth. Well, we have trouble with these silage trucks. They keep overheating, and Gary's been good to work with, but it's just not working. And finally, Dad is reading an article about in western Kansas, there's these silage trucks, and they've got this new type of radiator. And this radiator works great, and Dad tells me, he says, "This is what we need." He said, "If we put this in the truck, I think we'll be all right." But he said, "We got a big problem." He said, "Gary can't buy that radiator because that's not his supplier." He said, "I can go buy it. I can go to western Kansas. I can pick it up, or you can bring it back to put on our truck." But he said, "Gary can't buy it. And you know what? Gary's got rules." And he said, "And I'm afraid if we make Gary mad, Gary won't do any business with us anymore." And he said, "Then we got to drive like 50 miles to find a diesel mechanic." And we'd heard this had happened because Gary, if he got mad at you, he just wouldn't work on your vehicles anymore. So Dad stewed about this for several days. I mean, this is like a Monday, and finally by Friday, in fact, in between times, Dad had been looking in the yellow pages trying to find other diesel mechanics so we could just take this one time to get this radiator put on. Finally, Friday rolls around. Dad says to me, he said, "I've just decided we're going to go out there." He said, "I've always gotten along fine with Gary." He said, "I'm just going to explain the situation. I hope he's not going to get mad. If he gets mad, we'll just have to find a new mechanic." But he said, "I think it's worth it." He said, "But there's one thing about it." He said, "You've got to go with me." He said, "Because I need a witness if things get bad." So I'm not looking forward to this trip, but we walk into the diesel shop, and there is Gary. He is behind the counter right there. Dad walks in. I stay back a little bit because I have no idea what's about to happen. Dad walks in and says, "Gary, you know, we've been having trouble with that radiator." He said, "I have found this radiator." Dad even took in the article. He said, "This is in western Kansas." He said, "These guys out there have been using this radiator." But he said, "Gary, we got a problem." Gary said, "Oh?" He said, "Yeah, Gary, I've looked about this. You can't get this through your supplier." He said, "I can go out and get it, or Andrew can go get it and bring it back." But he said, "You'd have to put it on, but you can't buy it. I'll have to buy it for you to put on. And I know you've got rules about things like that." And I'm watching this from afar, and I can tell that Gary is not getting it. Dad is explaining this. Gary's just nodding his head, but Gary doesn't realize that literally 2 feet above his head is hanging a rule that he put up there that says he will not do what Dad's asking him to do. And so Dad now realizes that Gary's just nodding his head, but Dad really wants to make sure that Gary understands what he's asking him to do so there's not a problem. And so then Dad says, well, Gary, I just wanted to make sure this was fine with you because I know you have rules. So Dad now points to the rules hanging above his head. I know you have rules about putting other people's parts on. And finally, you can sell it clicks with Gary. He understands what's going on. Gary has this weird look on his face. My dad goes by the initials ML. He looks at him and says, ML. He said, these rules up here, they don't apply to customers like you. You like me. I'm thinking, no, we don't.